It's really a pleasure for me to be here and to talk with fellow travelers in this world where we're all aspiring to build that better future we all know is possible. Lots of connections with Stanford in my life and in my work. My daughter did her PhD here. My boss, of course, did his MBA here. Some great folks who teach at the university on the Skoll Foundation board. Several social entrepreneurs did degrees here at Stanford, and it's really wonderful to be here for all those connections and because I understand this place and its special position in Silicon Valley. You know, the East Coast, where I'm from, the way people get to know you or figure out who you are is they ask you first where you grew up and then where you went to school. And I like to think that at places like Stanford and here in the Silicon Valley, where the Skoll Foundation and this wonderful university exist, we ask people a very different question. We ask them, what do you do? So that's what I'm going to be speaking to, what the Skoll Foundation does, how we do it, why we do it, and what the implications of our work really are. Then I'll get to sort of the heart of my talk, where I'll talk about some fictions about social entrepreneurship, some facts, and then get to a future that we really embrace and we trust you will too. So with that, I think we'll get underway. Our story really begins, as many great stories do, with inspiration. This is Jeff Skoll. Both he and I dodged siblings by reading as kids, and he was a precocious kid, so we read well beyond his years. James Michener, Aldous Huxley, Ayn Rand, and from these authors and others, he developed a worldview that wasn't terribly comforting. He decided at a pretty young age that the world was really facing a number of problems and that his future might not be so bright. But he understood and really resonated to the power of storytelling, and he decided that he would become a writer. Of course, like many who have these big dreams, he put that dream aside for a more practical path, got himself to the University of Toronto, where he graduated with a degree in electrical engineering, and immediately launched himself as an entrepreneur. One of his earliest ventures was a company called Computers on the Move. It was the early days of computers, and this was a computer rental business. And there was one major flaw in his business, and that was that the computers kept on moving and taking the company's profits with them. So with that, he decided that he really didn't know all that much about business, and that's what led him to apply and get into the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he came in the 90s. Of course, graduating with his MBA, he was prepared, as many of you already are or will be, he was prepared to know a really good opportunity when he saw it. So when Pierre Omidyar came to him in 1995 and said he had a great idea for an online auction business, Jeff knew exactly how to analyze this opportunity, and he turned Pierre down flat. Pierre, that's a really stupid idea, he said. But his entrepreneur's sort of DNA got the better of him. He was working for Knight Ridder at the time, and shortly thereafter, he said, you know, maybe it's not such a bad idea, let's try it. And he joined Pierre, and of course, as we all know, eBay became one of the most successful and phenomenal internet companies of all time. In 1998, of course, the company went public. And its first president, its employee number one, found himself wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. It took him a while to get used to that wealth, though. He was still living in a house with a number of guys and eating burritos and driving an old beat-up Mazda. But within a year or so after eBay's public offering, he thought again about those problems that had so affected him when he was a kid, and he decided it was really time to get cracking. 1 year after eBay's public offering, he founded the Skoll Foundation, not with a big slug of money, but with a down payment, about $10 million, and a big vision. And that vision was founded on his belief that a world of peace, prosperity, and sustainability was the kind he wanted to pass on to his children. And speaking of children, my little riff on Jane Austen here, Jeff is still single. Of course, he attacked the idea of philanthropy with all the imaginative zeal of his entrepreneurial imagination. Didn't go at it just creating one entity, but over the past 12 years, he's created a whole suite of organizations, really a portfolio of organizations driving to create that vision of a world of peace, prosperity, and sustainability. The organizations include Capricorn Investment Group, the Skoll Global Threats Fund, Take Part, and of course, Participant Media, which has produced, among other films, the famous An Inconvenient Truth, and more recently, The Help and Contagion, if you've seen those movies. But the Skoll Foundation was really the first of these social change entities. Capricorn antedates us a little bit, but Capricorn wasn't at that time a social change organization. We were really the petri dish, sort of the living laboratory for Jeff to develop his approach to philanthropy, his really unique approach to philanthropy. And our mission to invest, connect, and celebrate social entrepreneurs and the innovators who help them solve the most pressing problems really integrates his interest in media, his interest in connecting folks, driving change through networks. So the foundation in many ways has been the real crucible for this whole suite of social change ventures. This is really who we are, though, and this is how we came to our emphasis on social entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurship. In 2001, actually I joined Jeff at the end of 2000, just about a year after he'd created the foundation, but in 2001, neither of us had heard the term social entrepreneur. But we knew it all the same. Jeff's early idea was that you invest in the people who really have the passion, the drive, the resolve, and the skills to make a better world. And that's what led him, even as early as 2000, to seeing someone like Bill Strickland, whose case you may have come across, seeing Bill Strickland, someone who'd pioneered a really unique approach to education and to job preparation in inner city Pittsburgh, to invest in Bill as sort of a paradigm of someone who'd had a proven idea and was really ready to scale it nationally. So well before we launched our formal Skoll Awards for Social Entrepreneurship program in 2005, we were already investing in social entrepreneurs, in people like Bill Strickland and John Wood and Martin Fisher of Aprotech, now Kickstart. We knew that this was the kind of person who would really leverage the change that we hoped to see in the world. Today, our portfolio of social entrepreneurs is 91 social entrepreneurs strong, social entrepreneurs working in 74 organizations. 91 because some of them are partners, just as in the early day of Apple, we had Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, or HP, we had Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett. So long tradition in the Valley of partnerships. And of course, you know, Pierre and Jeff at eBay, long tradition of people partnering in this field, and our social entrepreneurs in the portfolio is really no exception. Over time, though, we don't just work. We've understood that change doesn't come about just with the venture as the unit of change, the venture, the individual social entrepreneur. We need game-changing ideas. We need those individuals. Jean Monnet, who was one of the architects of the EU, long before it became such a challenging idea, Jean Monnet said, to make change, you need individuals, but nothing lasts without institutions. And we take that one step further and say nothing lasts and nothing really drives large-scale change except collaborations, networks, partnerships. And so we too at the foundation take the approach of a social entrepreneur in developing partnerships that really leverage the assets we have to contribute. Those are our financial assets, those are our time, our talent, and our relationships and ideas to leverage those assets to their highest and best use. And we do it with partners. So we have content generation partners, media partners like Sundance, and I know Jim is doing a case right now on our partnership with Sundance and the Sundance Institute. We have broadcast partners with NPR and PBS, and Frontline World to get the content disseminated in the world. Over the last several years of our work with media, more than 35 million people have seen stories about social entrepreneurs on these media outlets. And then we have academic partnerships. In 2003, we founded the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship at the Said Business School at Oxford. That business school was only 6 years old at the time. It was a formative moment for them to really embrace social entrepreneurship. And one of our flagship programs, of course, is the Skoll World Forum for Social Entrepreneurship. And you see there Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who addressed this remarkable gathering last year and received our first Global Treasure Award. Queen Noor down there in the bottom right-hand corner, also speaking to what was going on in MENA last year with the remarkable Arab Spring. So really, partnerships are key to the way we do our work at the foundation. Okay, let's get to those. Let's get to some of those fictions. First, social entrepreneurship is just a fad. It's gonna pass. You know, it's hula hoops and it's not really for real. Well, nothing could be farther from the truth. In fact, hundreds of years ago, folks understood entrepreneurship was really about creating new ventures in the world. And in the 18th century, economists started to tumble to the idea that entrepreneurs actually absorb the risk of bringing new ideas and ventures forward into the world. So entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurs are first and foremost entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship has been around a long time, and it's here to stay. Even if we didn't have wonderful examples like Google and Apple in our midst, entrepreneurship has really driven business change over the years. At the Skoll Foundation, though, we're Schumpeterians. We believe that entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs are agents of creative destruction. And Jim referenced this work that Roger Martin and I did. And in it, we argue, really, that social entrepreneurs see equilibrium change. They see a status quo. And they recognize that that status quo really leads to the oppression or marginalization or under-optimization of some real significant segment of society. And they set out to change that. They're not just offering a palliative solution, but a disruptive solution. That's the differentiation we really subscribe to at the Skoll Foundation. So just a fad, here to stay. Social entrepreneurs really don't have it all that easy. I like to show this slide because you're all pretty young, but you probably recognize these two characters, right? You recognize the man? Fred Astaire. Okay, who's the woman? Ginger Rogers. Well, what is she famous for doing? Everything that Fred Astaire does, but backwards and in high heels. And that's the social entrepreneur to the entrepreneur. The social entrepreneur has to do everything the entrepreneur does. Come up with the game-changing idea, build the venture, attract the capital, build the market, bring the beneficiaries into the fold, but backwards and in high heels, because the networks and the systems for financing, capitalizing, getting the talent into the ventures, that doesn't exist the way it does in the private sector. So that's something we're working on at the Skoll Foundation. Fiction number 2, anyone can be a social entrepreneur. You know, lots of us see challenges in the world. Some percentage of us has an idea about how to tackle those challenges, but only a tiny, tiny fraction of humanity actually has the courage and the wherewithal to summon the resolve to create the venture to drive change in the world. So social entrepreneurs are not a dime a dozen. They are rare human beings. So not just anyone can be a social entrepreneur. Let me give you an example of really a remarkable social entrepreneur in someone like Paul Farmer. Most of you know who he is, right? An amazing public health doctor, also an anthropologist, created a remarkable organization called Partners in Health, been working in Haiti for over 2 decades now, to bring health care to the poorest of the poor. Believes that health care is a human right. Well, in the 90s, when a multi-drug resistant epidemic of tuberculosis broke out in the shanty towns of Lima, Paul wanted to address that by getting the protocol, the treatment, and the drugs to this desperately poor population. But WHO policy at the time was too expensive, can't be done, wouldn't buy it, wouldn't fund it, wouldn't support it. Well, Paul secured the funding and proved using community health workers that you could meet these standards for really sophisticated protocols. And in fact, over a 2 to 3 year period, achieved an 83% cure rate, which was superior for multi-drug resistant TB to cure rates that were achieved in cities like Boston or Detroit or New York. And with that, over a 10-year period, WHO actually shifted its policy and made it possible to get TB treatment to poor populations. Did the same thing with antiretrovirals and HIV/AIDS, and now wants to do the same thing with a cholera vaccine in Haiti. So this is equilibrium change. This is what makes social entrepreneurs so rare and so important. Fiction number 3, social change is a soft science. Doesn't have hard data, no proof. It's all, a bunch of hooey. Again, nothing could be farther from the truth. Take a social entrepreneur like Ann Cotton, who founded an organization called CAMFED, the Campaign for Female Education in Africa. It's now working in 5 African countries. Through her work, she's reached more than 1.5 million girls and women in Africa, has brought scholarship support to 47,000 plus, created this remarkable network of alumni now, the CAMA network, has provided seed capital for more than 15,000 small businesses. At the end of the day, though, it's driven by results, by the proof that they're making a difference. So what's the evidence that this works? In districts, in school districts where CAMFED works in Tanzania, dropout rates reduced by 37%. CAMFED has also brought its child protection policy in as a cornerstone of Tanzania's new national program for development and education. And just to make this even more impressive, to do this piece of work, to bring this child protection policy into mainstream government policy for the government, they convened 60 stakeholders to do this. And this is the first upgrade to this policy since 1996. This is how we think of large-scale change. Policy change, behavior change, systems change. This is what it looks like. This is what our portfolio of social entrepreneurs is doing. They are driving impact at scale. Some facts now. Fact number 1, social entrepreneurs will partner or perish. Remember when I said that you need the individual with the game-changing insight, you need the venture to drive that insight into the market, but to really affect large-scale change, you need partnerships, you need collaborations, you need networks. And so this is increasingly where we're working at the foundation, is in the development of these networks. So we see, for example, I just provided the example of an Ann Cotton working with 60 stakeholders in Tanzania to influence government policy. One of the, I think, most dramatic examples from our portfolio over the past year of a of a social entrepreneur partnering very effectively is Rupert Howe and the Marine Stewardship Council. They brokered a deal with McDonald's. That deal is ensuring Marine Stewardship Council certified fish for all McDonald's restaurants in Europe. That's 7,000 restaurants, 39 countries, 100 million filet-o-fish sandwiches each year. Now that's scale. You get to that supply chain, you can start to drive certification in a really major way. And this is all about addressing a huge problem in the world, which is the fact that we've depleted more than 70% of fish stocks. And this is a major supply of protein for the world's population. Serious issue, one way to address it, then the partnership that really can get to the supply chain. So social entrepreneurs figure out how to partner in order to drive scale. Fact number 2, with the spotlight increasingly on social entrepreneurs, criticism will follow. And this is a good thing. This is a healthy thing. We need this kind of scrutiny. We need the kind of research to tell us what's working and what's not. In our portfolio, one of our social entrepreneurs, Paul Rice, working with Fairtrade USA, was recently the target of a hit piece in the New York Times. Fairtrade USA has basically seceded from the international organization, Fairtrade, arguing that, that it will be more optimal for the poor if fair trade can include the large plantations as well as the co-ops. Now, this is anathema to the international organization. So lots of hits there, lots of criticism, and we say bring it on, because this is a truth moment to really absolutely demonstrate to the world this thesis that if we bring the large plantations in, we will really spread the benefits of fair trade, and we will open up consumption and consumer awareness in a way we couldn't do otherwise. But you've all seen, I'm sure, case after case challenging microfinance. You probably also know that Kiva in our portfolio, again to Stanford MBA's Matt Flannery and Jessica Jackley, confronted sort of major criticism along the lines of their not being forthright about how the model worked. Kiva works with MFIs, it works with intermediaries, but it's understood as a peer-to-peer lending platform. So they took a lot of heat for this and went clean. You know, Matt went online, he explained, they learned a lot from this experience. So social entrepreneurs will take the heat, that's a good thing. Third fact, the evidence is growing that this stuff works. This picture is of a woman using the Super Moneymaker pump, the product, again, of a Stanford engineer, Martin Fisher. Kickstart is the organization. And Kickstart has a really skillful way of providing the impact evidence of its technologies. It works with the supply chain, again, at the retailer level, so that as each pump is sold, the retailer has to gather the evidence, that the health data, the income data, the family data for the purchaser of the pump. With that, you have benchmark information, and then Kickstart's able to track that over a 2 to 3 year period to really show the difference this technology makes for these smallholder families. And in the last decade, Kickstart's results have really started to mount up. They annually they do 88. They've sold 88,000 of these pumps annually, and that is resulting in more than $89 million of new revenue. And in fact, that revenue is enough to move the needle on GDP in a country like Kenya. So real evidence that this stuff works, and it is making a difference at scale. So the future, We think the future is bright. We think the future really beckons, and that social entrepreneurs are holding that flame aloft for everybody to see. You're seeing here the 4 newest organizations we're bringing into our portfolio. 3 of them are based in Asian countries and Asian settings. Gawad Kalinga, Proximity, and Nidan. Gawad Kalinga in the Philippines, Nidan in India, and Proximity Design in Burma, in Myanmar. Landisa works on property rights. It works on property rights, securing property rights for people all over the world. Proximity, though, is a wonderful place to pause. Again, the newest member of the Skoll community, with Debbie and Jim Taylor, graduates of Jim Patel's famous course on designing for extreme affordability. And they take that thesis that you can design to meet people's needs to technologies that they develop in the context, in the setting. So again, technologies that are meeting irrigation and agricultural productivity needs and new energy supply needs and other services that the poorest of the poor really require. So great new addition to the portfolio with a wonderful connection back to Stanford. And we like to invest in an inflection point. We invest in social entrepreneurs with a proven track record. We're mezzanine investors. And here we're looking at the inflection point really not just for the venture and for its scale, but we see Myanmar, we see this country which is starting to open up to the West, starting to open up its political processes as at an inflection point too. So bringing those two together is really, we think, a remarkable convergence, and we're expecting greatness. Let's just imagine for a moment what the future can look like. Let's imagine that together with our new awardees, all our portfolio, our partners, our wonderful staff team, our board, Jeff and I. Well, we really believe that the world can be made better. Just imagine what tomorrow's headlines could be. Together with the social entrepreneurs driving change, if we do more than make a dent on the world's most pressing problems. Truly transformational potential is within the reach of all social entrepreneurs, and it's what we aspire to at the Skoll Foundation. So we're going to show a little clip here to make that vision come alive for you. We think John Gardner had it right. You know, right after I started at the foundation, I brought Jeff right over here to the Stanford campus to meet with John Gardner, who was one of my mentors. And John, as probably all of you know, was the architect of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, a remarkable social entrepreneur, the founder of Common Cause, the independent sector, a great foundation leader, headed the Carnegie Foundation during the time which it underwrote public broadcasting on the Children's Television Workshop. Really a remarkable human being. And Jeff and I asked him in great humility what it is that we should do as a foundation to realize the tremendous opportunity in front of us. And he said, bet on good people doing good things. It's those good people who are seizing those breathtaking opportunities to build that better world. Thank you, and let's have some questions.
My question is, how do you decide between two projects that have clear objective outcomes, but may have a different impact on actual well-being for those that they work with? So for example, how would you choose between a project that will install X number of wells versus a project that will remove Y number of mines, for example? Like, how do you choose between different organizations that have great measurable outcomes, but may perhaps have different overall impacts on society?
It's a really good question, and I'll just start by saying that we have an open application process. We work with a network of referrals all over the world so that we get qualified applicants for our Skoll Awards process. Get more than in a cycle, we'll get well over 300, and usually there are thousands who start our eligibility quiz. We put an eligibility quiz online to make it easier for people. We respect everybody's time, so we want them to self-select and decide whether they're really ready for the Skoll Award themselves. But of those 300 or so that come across the desk, there's almost none that don't have some merit, that don't have some wonderful ideas that aren't inspiring and really worth support. But we have a very, very high bar. So we're looking for evidence that there's a real innovation there. We're looking for evidence that the impact has already been demonstrated, that there has been beyond proof of concept. This is already working in a region, in a part of the world, in a country, and ready to scale beyond that. Then we're looking for the inflection point. Is this really poised for large-scale change? Are the targets clear? Is there a plan in place that's a compelling and credible plan? So we look for all that evidence, and by the time we're carrying out our due diligence, we're almost convinced, but we go into the field to absolutely make certain that this is working, that it can deliver, and there is that opportunity for large-scale change, for behavior change, systems change, or policy change. We're looking at partnerships. How strategic are the partnerships? How high leverage are they? So putting all those, arraying all those criteria, that's how we make our decisions, and it's a real winnowing process. So from the thousands who start the eligibility quiz to the 4 that you saw up there is a very challenging process. The criteria are high. Jeff is in this to drive large-scale change. He's not in it to make social entrepreneurship a household name, and so that's what we're after. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you.
Sure.
It seemed like a lot of the visions that you were showing at the end might be the result of decades and decades of investment in an entrepreneur. And I came from an organization, I actually worked for one of the people on one of your early slides, but it's more of an established organization now, and we had trouble competing against these entrepreneurs for funding. And I'm wondering how the Skoll Foundation makes those decisions and what the foundation sees its role as in terms of funding an entrepreneur initially and then backing out versus sustaining them for decades.
Yeah, that's, again, someone like Paul Farmer will tell you he wants partners who will be in it for the long haul. Probably most of you know that of the 300+ billion that flows into the nonprofit sector in the U.S. is mostly made up of individual contributions. Philanthropy, formal philanthropy or foundation funding is only about 15% of that pie. And foundations really aren't the logical long-term partner, but they can be a high-leveraged investor at a critical time, and that's what we try to do. Is this the proof point for the scaling opportunity? That's what the Skoll Award is designed to do. The Skoll Award comes in when the organization, the venture, is really poised to take advantage of a very significant opportunity to grow. And so the Skoll Award is unrestricted core operating support, recognizing that the social entrepreneur knows better, the organization knows better about where to invest to achieve that opportunity. But we used to make a follow-on round. And we've recently changed that because going back to this idea that the ecosystem is essential to drive change, we think that continued investment in the organization per se is not necessarily the highest and best use of philanthropic capital. So we are now making innovation investments in addition to the Skoll Awards, which are really targeting a very specific opportunity that can be achieved within a specific time frame. So for example, we have in our portfolio 4 social entrepreneurs who've come together believing that development and aid as a system is not just broken, but badly in need of new metrics, because they see that the trajectory of development, where much of the world's population is in fact getting richer, getting more income, and the appetite for protein is growing, the appetite for consumption is growing. And with that, the world is really on an unsustainable trajectory. So they believe that that development has to factor in sustainability. And until we have metrics to do that, these two trajectories are really on a collision course. So they've come together to do just that, to develop a new paradigm and a new metric for development, for sustainable development. So that's the kind of thing that we will fund now to help them do that as a consortium with a specific policy change target in addition to our core support of social entrepreneurs. So, something of a 45-degree shift for us, but that's what you do. You adapt, you learn, you try to do more with your resources to really deliver on those aspirations. Yes?
I don't know if this is working.
Yeah, it's working.
But yeah, I had a question just about sort of the fellowship ecosystem. Just basically, how does Skoll play with some of the other players like Schwab or Echoing Green? And in what ways are you all similar and work together versus in what ways do you feel that you differentiate from each other?
Yeah, that's a nice question. When I was talking about partnership, I should have mentioned that we also support intermediaries. So, for example, Ashoka. We've supported Ashoka for years, and we will continue to support Ashoka. But way back when I came on board, and Jeff and I really developed the mission and the strategy, we brought in a consultant to really partner with us and figure out where we could add differentiated value to this ecosystem. Right from the beginning, we recognized that it made no sense for us to do what others were already doing. At that time, Ashoka's sweet spot was early stage. Echoing Green's sweet spot, early stage, students, also domestic. Schwab, Davos, they weren't making grants or funding. So we looked at the other players in the field, figured out what was missing was really international and mezzanine investing. So right from the beginning, we decided to work with all those other players as part of our network, that they could make referrals, but we would invest at a stage none of them were investing in. The Ashoka, before Ashoka even had U.S. social entrepreneurs in its portfolio, it was making $5,000 grants to international players at an early stage. And we recognized that this inflection point for scaling a venture, and for that venture then to be key in scaling its impact, was a differentiated place for us to play. We partner with all these folks. In formal and in informal ways, but we're also differentiated in the way I mentioned. And something else I didn't talk about that really is a differentiator for us is, as a philanthropy, one of our defining attributes or defining assets is our financial resource, and we. Different from a lot of foundations out there, not just the ecosystem of folks working in social entrepreneurship, but differentiated from a lot of philanthropic actors, we invest across the spectrum of our corpus. So we make grants, We make program-related investments, and we've done that from the beginning. And we also invest in entrepreneurs in the direct investing allocation of our corpus. So in addition to the social entrepreneurs you saw there, we've invested in probably 12 to 15 entrepreneurs who have who see a market upside, financial return as well as social return in their models. So Jane Chen, probably some of you know, Embrace. That's in our portfolio at the foundation, in addition to other investments in social entrepreneurs working in civil society models. Is that helpful?
What did you learn from some of your earliest investments, such as Bill Strickland's organization?
Oh, that sometimes reach exceeds grasp, and it takes time. It can take time. When we invested in Bill, he had a really sweeping vision to bring the national centers for art and technology to the country and to the world, and he essentially saw them proliferating. And today there are 5 of these centers open, and that's over 10 years. So it's taken a good long time, and none of them are as robust or as grand as the center in Pittsburgh. So it can take time. That's one really significant lesson. And the second lesson is that it's not all about the money. That a lot of what we have the capacity to do, and we exercise that capacity, we try to think and act like a social entrepreneur with all the assets we have to bring to bear. But we can exert a lot of influence with our media work, with our partnerships. So, for example, Writers for Health. We did a series with the Rockhopper and the BBC on social entrepreneurs about 2 years ago. One of the segments was on Writers for Health, which uses motorcycle to deliver health services in sub-Saharan Africa. And Writers for Health used that segment when they went into the Zambia. They screened it for the Zambia Ministry of Health, and they were able to ink an MOU in 12 days. And usually it takes a minimum of 14 months, 2 years. So that was extraordinary, but that's the power of media and some of the work we do beyond direct investing in social entrepreneurs. So leveraging all those assets has been a big lesson too.
Hi, thank you very much for your time and being here. My question is back to metrics, but quantifying metrics that are a little less tangible. So you talked about behavior change with something, is sometimes hard to measure. So for example, if you have a girl in Tanzania who may not hit the mark of graduating from high school, but her life has changed as a result of what's being done on the ground. So how do you seek to capture some of those things that may miss the metrics, but is still adding value to society?
Well, you are so right about that. We're not in this to count what's not important. We're in this to tell powerful stories and to back those stories up with evidence of the difference that this is making. So it's an and here. We believe there are powerful stories about a girl, as you said, whose life is transformed because of an opportunity that she has. She might be the first person in her community to graduate from high school and to build her own house. So we hear all those stories, and they inspire us. So we try to capture those as much as possible. We tell them on our website. We share them through our media work, and back them up with the evidence that this is, that this stuff really, really works. I mentioned Andrea and Barry Coleman and Writers for Health. They got their start in a really interesting way. These are 2 motorcycle enthusiasts, about as unlikely social entrepreneurs as you could imagine. Two motorcycle enthusiasts, and they are part of this big, fundraising event that Save the Children is putting on. They do it for several years. Then they decide it's time to go to Somalia and really see how this stuff is working. And they get to Somalia and they can't believe what they see. They see women being wheeled in wheelbarrows into clinics, women hemorrhaging in childbirth. And they see vehicles on the side of the road rusted for want of a $3 oil filter or a simple oil change because of aid, dysfunctional aid policies. So they go home and they mortgage their house because they feel there's a better way to do this work. That's the kind of story we like to capture, but we also want to tell the story about the 2 districts in Zimbabwe where Riders is operating, one of which, one district, Riders, is functional. They have a 40% drop in malaria infection rates. The district next door has a 20% increase. So that's a 60% differential. That's proof that they make a difference. So the great story and the difference that's being made, it's an and. You remember, Jeff wanted to be a writer. He wanted to tell stories, and that's what he does with participant media. So a film like Contagion, brings the reality of what a pandemic could do to the world alive.
Hi, thanks for
Sure.
being here. I was wondering, you invest in groups like Ceres that have principles for responsible investment in the
Right.
greatest
Right.
level possible, trillions of dollars pension funds. Do you see, how do you manage your own endowment at Skoll, or is it part of, can you manage it in a responsible way in the way Ceres is trying to put forth, or is there a trade-off there? And
No.
how do you manage that?
That's what I was saying a little while ago, that in contrast to a lot of foundations, we actually do apply principles for responsible investing across the portfolio. Now, I'm not gonna shine you on. Much of the portfolio is invested in pretty traditional funds, but increasingly, we're able to invest in our direct asset investment asset class in entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and Tesla, or in folks who come up with waterless urinals, or in rice plantation in Tanzania, and Jane Chen's Embrace. So we are really seeking to leverage all the assets in our portfolio, and it's a really powerful way, I think, to make a difference. And more foundations, I think, should really look at PRIs and at sort of this latent potential that's locked up in their investments. So you're absolutely right. I think that's a frontier. That's a real frontier for philanthropy. And more smart people are going to see how much opportunity they're leaving on the table because they don't leverage that corpus. Yes.
Thanks so much for your time. I
my
really
pleasure.
hope Stanford's new seed program leverages your expertise.
We're looking at it and thinking about how we might influence it, and what some of the possibilities are.
That's good. One of the things I struggle with, looking at the powerful movie you showed about no nukes, ending climate change, that sort of thing, and thinking about transformative change versus when we typically think of social entrepreneurship, and I think when the dialogue happens, it's the Embrace, it's the Kickstarts, it's the Delights of the world. It's products and services that are discrete interventions to solve a very small problem. Do you see products and services as a way to transformative change, or do you see those two things as separate?
No, I don't see them as separate, and I don't see them as discrete. I see them as a piece of a larger puzzle. So if the challenge that Jane Chin is working on is the vulnerability of these babies who are born in environments where they, number one, can't afford the millions of dollars for incubators, and number two, don't have access to power, even if they were able to have the incubator. Well, that's that's a product that's meeting a very specific market need and niche, but the real issue is infant mortality. And there are going to be lots of other innovations that are addressing this too. Riders for Health is addressing that by trying to create a health infrastructure so you can get to clinics. And they've actually developed a kind of a sling that goes on the motorcycle so that you can get people who are in critical need to clinics. So you know, the Embrace might work in that. So we need these social entrepreneurs to come together. We need better infrastructure. We need much more coordination to really affect change. And an organization like Amazon, working in Brazil and in the rainforest region, is usually using satellite technology to monitor deforestation real time, so you can get this data real time to governments so they can enforce the policies that are in place. Absent that information, you know, you continue to have renegade deforestation, illegal logging, and this has really created the transparency and given governments the tools they need to execute against the policies already in place. So that kind of leverage, that's really the secret sauce of social entrepreneurship. But Amazon, all it would be is a nifty idea if there weren't the partnership with government and with media. So that's what it takes, and that's increasingly the way we see this transformative change coming about.